The desert heat shimmered like liquid fire across the Afghan highlands as Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Hammer pressed his body against the rocky outcrop. Sweat carved clean lines through the dust and grime coating his weathered face, each drop a testament to the 12 hours his SEAL team had been pinned down in this godforsaken valley. The enemy had them surrounded, and ammunition was running dangerously low. Contact left, multiple tangos moving up the ridge. Petty Officer First Class Danny Ghost whispered into his throat mic, his voice barely audible even to the man lying 3 feet away. The sharp crack of incoming rifle fire punctuated his words, sending chips of stone flying from their meager cover. Checked his magazine for the 100th time in the past hour. 7 rounds left. Around him, his 5-man team was in similar straits. What had started as a routine intelligence-gathering mission had turned into a nightmare when they'd stumbled across a major Taliban stronghold hidden in the mountain caves. Their extraction point was compromised, their backup delayed by a sandstorm, and now they faced at least 30 hostiles closing in from 3 directions. The mission had begun 3 days earlier at Forward Operating Base Chapman. Intelligence reports suggested a high-value target was operating from this remote valley, coordinating attacks against coalition forces across the region. His team, call sign Neptune 6, had been tasked with confirming the target's presence and marking the location for a precision strike. Simple reconnaissance in and out, no direct engagement expected. But the mountains had their own plans. A mechanical failure with their insertion helicopter had forced them to land 2 clicks from their intended drop zone, putting them on foot through hostile territory. Then the weather had turned, grounding air support for the past 18 hours. Now, as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, realized they might not see another sunrise. Petty Officer Second Class Mike Bull, their heavy weapons specialist, crawled over on his belly, dragging his nearly empty saw behind him. The big Texan's usually jovial demeanor had been replaced by the grim focus of a professional killer. "Chief, we got maybe 200 rounds of 5.56 left between all of us. They keep pressing like this. We're gonna be throwing rocks in about an hour." Nodded, his mind racing through tactical options. Their radio operator, Petty Officer Second Class Alex Codec Martinez, had been trying to raise anyone on the emergency frequencies for the past 3 hours. The mountains played havoc with communications, bouncing signals into empty valleys or absorbing them entirely into the rocky terrain. Their satellite radio had taken shrapnel during the initial contact, leaving them with only short-range equipment designed for team coordination, not long-distance emergency calls. "Ghost, what's the count on our 6?" asked, referring to their rear position where Hospital Corpsman Second Class Tommy Doc Williams was providing security while monitoring their wounded team member. "Doc's got eyes on at least 8 tangos moving through the lower rocks. They're trying to get below us, cut off any retreat down the valley." His voice carried the strain of a man who'd been under fire too long. Even the most experienced operators felt the psychological pressure of extended combat, and Ghost had been fighting longer than most. The wounded man was Petty Officer Third Class Kid Johnson, the youngest member of the team at 22. A piece of shrapnel from an RPG blast had torn through his left shoulder, and while Doc had stabilized him, the kid was in no condition to fight or move quickly. Faced every team leader's nightmare, having to balance the survival of 5 men against the care needed for 1. Johnson had proven himself capable during their insertion and the first day of reconnaissance. Despite his youth and relatively limited experience, he'd shown the intelligence and adaptability that made SEALs effective. He'd spotted the initial Taliban patrol that had nearly compromised their position, and his quick thinking with a distraction grenade had allowed them to eliminate the threat silently. But war had a way of leveling the playing field, and experience meant nothing when explosives started flying. The enemy was professional, had to admit. These weren't untrained insurgents taking potshots from a distance. The fighters closing in on their position moved with discipline and coordination that spoke of formal military training. Their equipment was newer than the typical Taliban cache, and their tactics suggested someone with real battlefield experience was calling the shots. "Chief, I got something," Codec whispered urgently, his voice carrying a note of hope for the first time in hours. "Picking up chatter on the emergency frequency. Can't make out much, but someone's broadcasting on our frequency." Lowe crawled over to the radio operator's position, keeping his head below the rocky. Codec handed him the handset and pressed it to his ear, straining to hear through the static and interference. Neptune 6, this is Guardian Angel. Do you copy? Over. The voice was female, calm and professional, cutting through the static with crystal clarity. Felt his heart skip a beat. Guardian Angel wasn't a call sign he recognized, and female voices on tactical frequencies in this part of Afghanistan were rare enough to be noteworthy. Guardian Angel, this is Neptune 6 Actual. We copy your transmission. We are in deep trouble down here. Heavy contact, multiple wounded, running low on everything. Can you provide assistance? Over. The response came back immediately, as if the operator had been waiting for their reply. Neptune 6 Actual, Guardian Angel copies all. I have eyes on your position. Count 28 hostiles in 3 groups moving to surround you. You've got about 15 minutes before they complete their encirclement. Sit tight and keep your heads down. Help is coming. Over. Exchanged glances with Codec. Eyes on their position meant someone was close enough to conduct visual reconnaissance, but the mountains around them appeared empty of friendly forces. Air support had been grounded for hours, and the nearest coalition forces were more than 50 kilometers away across terrain that would take hours to traverse. Guardian Angel, Neptune 6 Actual, can you confirm your position and available assets? We need immediate support or we're not making it out of this valley. Over. The pause stretched longer this time and began to wonder if they'd lost contact. Then the voice returned, carrying a note of something that might have been amusement. Neptune 6 Actual, Guardian Angel, I'm closer than you think and I've got the tools for the job. When you see the first tango drop, that's your signal to move. Head northeast toward the high ground. There's a cave system about 200 meters up the slope that'll give you cover and concealment. Can you move your wounded? Over. Looked back toward Doc Williams's position where Johnson lay propped against a boulder, conscious but pale from blood loss and shock. The kid was tough, but moving 200 meters uphill under fire would be challenging for a healthy operator, let alone someone dealing with a significant wound. Guardian Angel, we can move our wounded, but it's going to be slow. How long can you keep them off us? Over. Neptune 6, Guardian Angel, long enough. When the show starts, move fast and don't look back. I'll keep the bad guys busy. Out. The radio fell silent, leaving staring at the handset with a mixture of hope and confusion. Someone was out there, someone with the capability and willingness to engage nearly 30 enemy fighters to give his team a chance at survival. But who was Guardian Angel, and how had they gotten into position without anyone knowing? Chief, we doing this? Asked, having overheard enough of the radio conversation to understand the situation. The sniper's eyes held the same mixture of hope and skepticism that felt. In their business, unknown help could be a lifesaver or a trap, and experience taught SEALs to be suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. Made the decision that separated leaders from followers. Sometimes you had to trust in the unknown, especially when the known quantities were all pointing toward disaster. We're doing it. Pass the word. When Guardian Angel makes her move, we move. Ghost, you take point. Bull, you help Doc with Kid. Codec, stay close to me and keep that radio handy. The team began their preparations with the quiet efficiency of professionals who trained together for years. Extra ammunition was redistributed to ensure everyone had something to fight with during the movement. Doc Williams checked Johnson's bandages one more time and gave him a shot of morphine to help manage the pain during what was going to be a rough journey. Johnson himself tried to sit up, his young face set with determination despite the obvious pain. Chief, I can make it. Don't leave anyone behind because of me. Gripped the kid's good shoulder. Nobody's getting left behind, kid. That's a promise. Just focus on putting one foot in front of the other when the time comes. The waiting was always the hardest part. Had been in similar situations before during his 15-year career with the teams, but the tension never got easier to bear. Minutes stretched like hours as they watched for any sign of this mysterious guardian angel who'd promised to even the odds. The enemy was getting closer. Could hear voices now, speaking in Pashto and Dari, the local languages that his limited training allowed him to partially understand. Orders were being passed, positions coordinated. The fighters were professionals, and they knew they had their quarry trapped. They were taking their time, making sure their encirclement was complete before making the final assault. Movement on the eastern ridge, whispered. 3 tangos working their way down toward the valley floor. They'll have a clear shot at our position in about 5 minutes. Felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. Each decision could mean the difference between his team's survival and their deaths in this remote valley. The responsibility for 5 lives, including his own, was a burden he'd carried for years, but it never got lighter. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of boots on stone and the occasional whispered command from their pursuers. Found himself checking his watch obsessively, counting down the minutes until their tactical situation would become completely untenable. Then, cutting through the afternoon air like a thunderclap, came the sound that would change everything. The sharp crack of a high-powered rifle, followed immediately by a shout of alarm from somewhere up the eastern ridge. Raised his binoculars just in time to see a figure in enemy gear tumble from behind a boulder, his weapon clattering down the slope. "That's our signal," whispered into his throat Mike. "Move, move, move." The SEAL team burst from their defensive positions like runners exploding from starting blocks. Had drilled movement under fire countless times, but doing it with a wounded team member while low on ammunition added layers of complexity that no training exercise could fully replicate. Another rifle shot echoed across the valley and saw a second enemy fighter drop from a position that would have provided overwatch for their movement. Whoever Guardian Angel was, she was making every shot count, and her timing was flawless. Each enemy fighter that fell was one who'd been positioned to interfere with their escape route. Doc Williams had Johnson on his feet and moving, with Bull providing support on the wounded operator's opposite side. Despite his injury, the kid was keeping pace, his jaw set against the pain as they climbed toward the cave system Guardian Angel had identified. Led the way, his rifle ready as he bounded from cover to cover, providing security for the team's movement. Behind them, more rifle shots rang out in a steady rhythm that spoke of careful target selection and precise marksmanship. Guardian Angel wasn't just shooting randomly into the enemy formation. She was systematically eliminating threats based on their tactical significance. Halfway to the cave entrance, risked a glance back toward their previous position. The enemy fighters were in complete disarray, diving for cover and trying to locate the source of the devastating fire that was cutting through their ranks. Several bodies lay motionless among the rocks, and the coordinated assault had dissolved into confused defensive movements. "Chief, we're almost there," called back, his voice tight with the effort of climbing while maintaining security. The cave entrance was just ahead, a dark opening in the mountainside that promised concealment and defensible positions. More shots echoed across the valley, each one followed by shouts of alarm or pain from the enemy positions. Tried to count the rifle reports, estimating at least a dozen shots fired with what appeared to be a very high hit rate. Whoever Guardian Angel was, she was operating at a level of marksmanship that impressed even experienced special operations personnel. The team reached the cave entrance and quickly established security while Doc Williams examined their new position. The opening led back into a natural chamber large enough to accommodate all 6 men with room for medical treatment and defensive positions. More importantly, it had multiple exits, preventing them from being trapped again if the enemy managed to locate their new position. "Codec, get Guardian Angel on the radio," ordered as his team settled into the cave and began treating their wounds and checking their equipment. "I want to know who we owe our lives to." The radio crackled to life almost immediately. "Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel, how's your new accommodations? Over." Keyed the handset, still trying to process what had just happened. "Guardian Angel, Neptune 6 actual, we're secure for now thanks to your intervention. That was some impressive shooting. Who exactly are we dealing with? Over." The pause was longer this time, and when the voice returned, detected what might have been amusement. "Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel. Let's just say I happened to be in the neighborhood when you needed a hand. The enemy is regrouping, but they're much more cautious now. You've got some breathing room to plan your next move. Over." Looked around at his team, all of whom were listening to the radio conversation with intense interest. They'd all heard the marksmanship demonstration, and they all understood that their salvation had come from someone operating alone against nearly 30 enemy fighters. "Guardian Angel, Neptune 6 actual. We need extraction, but our primary LZ is compromised. Can you assist with coordination? Over." "Neptune 6 actual, Guardian Angel. Already working on it. There's a clearing about 1 click north of your position that should work for helicopter operations, but we need to thin out the opposition first. They're still between you and any potential extraction point. Over." The reality of their situation began to sink in. They might have reached temporary safety, but they were still surrounded by a hostile force that outnumbered them more than 5-1. Their mysterious benefactor had bought them time and space, but the fundamental problem remained unchanged. Johnson was looking better after Doc's continued treatment, but he was in no condition for extended combat operations. Their ammunition situation remained critical, and they were still operating without air support or backup from conventional forces. Yet for the first time in hours, felt something approaching optimism. Guardian Angel had already proven capable of engaging superior numbers and winning. If she could continue providing support while they moved toward an extraction point, they might actually make it out of this valley alive. Guardian Angel Neptune 6 Actual, what do you need from us? Over. The response came back immediately, crisp and professional. Neptune 6 Actual Guardian Angel, rest up and stay alert. When darkness falls, we're going hunting. Out. Staff Sergeant had been watching the SEAL team's predicament unfold for the past 6 hours from her concealed position on the northern ridge. Through the scope of her custom M24 sniper rifle, she'd counted every enemy fighter, mapped every approach route, and calculated firing solutions for targets across the entire valley. When she'd finally heard their desperate radio transmissions, the decision to intervene hadn't required much thought. The 28-year-old Marine Scout sniper wasn't supposed to be in Afghanistan at all. Officially, she was on leave following her third deployment, taking time to recover from a shoulder injury sustained during a complex operation in Helmand Province. Unofficially, she'd been conducting what the intelligence community euphemistically called freelance reconnaissance along the Pakistan border, tracking high-value targets that conventional forces couldn't reach. Had grown up in the mountains of Colorado, learning to shoot from her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who'd passed down both his marksmanship skills and his quiet philosophy about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. By age 16, she could consistently hit targets at ranges that impressed seasoned hunters. By 22, she'd completed Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at the top of her class, one of only 3 women to earn the designation that year. Her current position offered perfect overwatch of the valley floor, with clear to multiple target areas and concealed approaches that would allow her to relocate if necessary. She'd been tracking the Taliban force since early morning, watching them establish their ambush positions and coordinate their assault on the trapped Americans. When she'd realized the enemy was about to complete their encirclement, she'd made her presence known through careful use of the emergency radio frequencies. The first shot had been a calculated risk, needed to demonstrate her capabilities while disrupting the enemy's tactical plan, and the fighter she'd selected was perfectly positioned to serve both purposes. The 7.62 Nade round had covered nearly 400 meters before striking its target center mass, dropping him instantly and sending his companions scrambling for cover. Worked the bolt on her rifle with practiced efficiency, chambering another round while scanning for her next target. The enemy fighters were reacting predictably, diving for whatever cover they could find while trying to locate the source of the incoming fire. Their trained responses actually made her job easier, as they moved into positions she'd already identified and ranged during her hours of observation. Her second shot eliminated a fighter who'd been moving to flank the SEAL's previous position. The round struck him as he crossed a gap between 2 boulders, sending him tumbling down the slope in full view of his companions. The psychological effect was immediate and obvious, as the remaining fighters became much more cautious about exposing themselves to move between positions. His earpiece crackled with radio chatter from the enemy positions, their voices carrying the tension and confusion of fighters suddenly facing an unknown threat. Her language training allowed her to understand most of what was being said, and she noted with satisfaction that they were arguing about how many shooters they faced and where the fire was coming from. The more confused they became, the less effective their coordination would be. Through her scope, she watched the SEAL team beginning their movement toward the cave system she'd identified earlier. The Marines had conducted extensive mapping operations in this region during previous deployments and had studied the terrain features carefully before positioning herself for observation. The caves would provide the Americans with defensive positions and multiple escape routes, buying time for whatever came next. Her third and fourth shots came in quick succession, eliminating fighters who'd attempted to reposition for better firing angles on the moving SEALs. His grandfather had taught her that precision shooting was as much about patience as accuracy, waiting for the exact moment when a target presented itself clearly. But in combat, patience had to be balanced against tactical necessities, and right now the priority was keeping the enemy off balance while the Americans reached safety. The Taliban fighters were beginning to adapt to the threat, using smoke grenades and coordinated movement to mask their repositioning. Had expected this development. These weren't untrained insurgents, but experienced fighters who understood battlefield tactics. That made them more dangerous, but also more predictable in some ways. Shifted her position slightly, moving 15 meters to a backup shooting position she'd prepared earlier. Changing locations was standard sniper doctrine when engaging multiple targets over extended periods. It prevented the enemy from fixing her position and allowed her to engage from different angles, maintaining the psychological pressure that came from facing an apparently mobile threat. Her new position offered a different perspective on the valley, with clear to areas that had been partially obscured from her original location. Quickly re-established her range cards and began identifying new targets among the enemy fighters who thought they'd moved to positions offering concealment from her previous firing point. The fifth shot came from an angle the enemy hadn't expected, striking a fighter who'd been attempting to coordinate the search for her position. Watched through her scope as the man's companions realized that their hunter could apparently see them from multiple directions, adding to the confusion and fear that was disrupting their tactical effectiveness. Keyed her radio handset, establishing contact with the SEAL team leader again. She'd identified herself only as Guardian Angel, maintaining operational security while providing the Americans with confidence that help was available. In the special operations community, reputation and capability mattered more than names or unit designations. Neptune 6 Actual Guardian Angel, your friends are getting creative with smoke and movement. They're going to try a coordinated rush on your old position in about 5 minutes, thinking you're still there. When they do, I'll have clean shots on the assault element. Use that time to get your wounded sorted out. Over. The SEAL team leader's response came back immediately, his voice carrying gratitude mixed with tactical professionalism. Guardian Angel Neptune 6 Actual, copy all. Our wounded is stable and mobile. What's your assessment of enemy strength after your intervention? Over. Scan the valley floor systematically, counting muzzle flashes and movement patterns among the Taliban positions. Her intervention had eliminated 5 fighters so far, but the remainder were still capable of mounting a significant threat if they regrouped effectively. Neptune 6 Actual Guardian Angel. I count 23 hostiles remaining, but they're scattered and confused. Their leadership element appears to be intact, but they're having trouble maintaining coordination under sniper fire. They'll probably try to withdraw to better positions as soon as they realize you've moved. Over. Watched as the enemy fighters began their coordinated assault on the SEAL's previous position, emerging from cover in a disciplined rush that would have been effective against a trapped enemy force. Instead, they found themselves completely exposed to her elevated position, silhouetted against the lighter-colored rocks below. Her 6th, 7th, and 8th shots came at measured intervals, dropping 3 fighters in the middle of their assault before the remainder realized they were attacking an empty position. The psychological impact was devastating. Could hear the panic in their radio chatter as they realized they'd been outmaneuvered by an enemy they still couldn't locate or identify. The surviving assault element scattered, abandoning their coordinated movement in favor of individual survival. Took her 9th shot at a fighter attempting to organize a retreat, sending a clear message that nowhere in the valley was safe from her oversight. The round struck him as he tried to rally his companions, and the remaining fighters went to ground completely. His radio crackled again, this time with a different voice speaking accented English. The enemy was attempting to communicate directly with whoever was disrupting their operation, probably hoping to negotiate or gather intelligence. Listened to the transmission but didn't respond. Maintaining mystery about her identity and capabilities was tactically advantageous. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks, and knew that darkness would bring new challenges. Night fighting favored different tactics, and the enemy might attempt to use the cover of darkness to either escape or mount a more sophisticated assault. Her night vision equipment and thermal imaging capabilities would provide advantages, but she'd be operating alone against opponents who knew the terrain intimately. Began planning her movement to the next phase of operations. The SEALs needed extraction, which meant clearing a path to a suitable landing zone while preventing the enemy from interfering with helicopter operations. The nearest appropriate clearing was approximately 1,000 meters north of the cave system, across terrain that offered multiple ambush opportunities for defending forces. Her 10th shot eliminated a spotter who'd been attempting to coordinate indirect fire on the cave entrance. Had noticed him using a laser rangefinder to calculate distances, probably preparing to direct mortar or rocket fire against the Americans' new position. Eliminating him disrupted those plans while demonstrating that she could see and engage threats across the entire valley. Through her scope, watched the Taliban fighters adapting their tactics again, this time focusing on withdrawal rather than assault. Several were beginning to move toward the valley's southern exit, probably intending to regroup and call for reinforcements. Faced a tactical decision: pursue the withdrawing forces to prevent reinforcement, or maintain overwatch on the SEAL's position in case other enemy elements attempted to exploit her absence. Chose a middle approach, taking carefully aimed shots at the withdrawing fighters' leadership while maintaining general observation of the tactical situation. Her 11th and 12th shots eliminated what appeared to be a communications specialist and a senior fighter attempting to organize the retreat, further disrupting enemy coordination. The Taliban force was beginning to collapse as an organized unit. Systematic elimination of key personnel had broken their command structure and tactical coordination, reducing them from a cohesive fighting force to a collection of individuals focused primarily on survival. This was exactly the psychological effect that precision marksmanship was designed to achieve when properly employed. Keyed her radio again, updating the SEAL team on the developing situation. Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel. Enemy is beginning to withdraw toward the southern exit. I've eliminated their leadership and communications elements. You should have a clear window for movement in about 15 minutes. How's your ammo situation? Over. The response revealed the Americans' continuing limitations despite their improved tactical position. Guardian Angel, Neptune 6 actual. We're still critically low on ammunition and need extraction sooner rather than later. Can you confirm the landing zone situation? Over. Had already been considering the extraction problem. The proposed landing zone was clear of enemy forces, but it was also exposed to observation from multiple directions. A helicopter attempting to land there would be vulnerable during approach and departure, requiring security that her lone rifle couldn't provide across such a wide area. Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel. The LZ is clear but exposed. We're going to need to control the surrounding high ground before any extraction attempt. That means moving after dark and establishing security positions. Can your team handle movement over broken terrain with your wounded? Over. Began calculating distances and timing for the night movement. The cave system to the landing zone was roughly 1,000 meters across terrain that rose and fell through several ridge systems. With a wounded team member and limited ammunition, the SEALs would need at least 2 hours to cover the distance safely, assuming they could avoid enemy contact along the way. Her 13th shot eliminated a fighter attempting to establish an observation post on the eastern ridge, a position that would have provided overwatch of any movement toward the landing zone. Was systematically denying the enemy any positions that could interfere with the Americans' eventual extraction. But she was also expending ammunition at a rate that would become problematic during an extended engagement. Carried a basic load of 40 rounds for her sniper rifle, plus additional ammunition for her secondary weapons. 13 rounds expended meant she'd used nearly 1/3 of her primary ammunition, and she hadn't yet begun the night phase of operations that would probably require the most intensive shooting. The enemy radio chatter had shifted to a different frequency, suggesting they were attempting to establish contact with higher headquarters or call for reinforcements. Language training allowed her to understand that they were reporting heavy casualties and requesting immediate support from other units in the region. Time was becoming a critical factor. If the Taliban could bring in reinforcements or heavy weapons, the tactical situation would shift dramatically against both herself and the Americans. Made a tactical decision that reflected both her training and her personality. Instead of maintaining a purely defensive posture, she would take the initiative during the hours of darkness, systematically hunting down the remaining enemy fighters while the SEALs prepared for extraction. It was aggressive and dangerous, but it offered the best chance of clearing the area completely before reinforcements could arrive. Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel. Change of plans. I'm going mobile tonight to clean up the remaining opposition. Stay in your position and maintain security. I'll clear the route to the LZ and establish overwatch for your movement. This is going to get interesting. Over. Began breaking down her position, carefully packing her equipment for movement while maintaining observation of the tactical situation. Night fighting would require different equipment and tactics, but it also offered advantages for a skilled operator willing to accept the risks of close-range engagement. Her 14th and 15th shots eliminated 2 more fighters attempting to establish new positions as darkness approached, was sending a clear message that the enemy's options were limited to withdrawal or elimination, and that remaining in the valley overnight would be extremely hazardous to their health. As the sun touched the western peaks and shadows began lengthening across the valley floor, completed her preparations for what would become the most intensive night of her military career. Somewhere below, 6 American Special Operations personnel were depending on her capabilities for their survival, and she had no intention of disappointing them. Shouldered her pack and began her careful movement toward the valley as darkness settled over the Afghan valley like a heavy blanket, moved through the shadows with the fluid precision of someone who'd spent years learning to become invisible. Her night vision goggles transformed the landscape into a green-tinted world of sharp contrasts, where heat signatures glowed like beacons against the cooling rocks. Every step was calculated, every movement planned to avoid detection by the enemy fighters who still believed they held tactical advantage in their home territory. Had changed her approach completely for night operations. Instead of the long-range precision shots that had characterized her afternoon engagement, she now carried her suppressed M4 carbine as her primary weapon, with the sniper rifle secured across her back for opportunities requiring longer-range engagement. Close-quarters combat in broken terrain demanded different tools and different tactics. Her first target presented itself within 30 minutes of beginning her hunt. A Taliban fighter had positioned himself in a natural depression between 2 large boulders, probably thinking the location provided concealment from overhead observation. Through her thermal imaging, could see his body heat clearly outlined against the cooler rocks, and his position offered no escape routes if detected. Approached from an angle that kept the man's weapon pointed away from her line of movement. Her suppressed carbine made virtually no sound when she fired, and the subsonic ammunition created no muzzle flash that might compromise her position. The fighter dropped silently, never knowing what had killed him. Quickly searched his body, recovering 2 magazines of ammunition and a handheld radio that might provide intelligence about enemy communications. The radio chatter revealed that the Taliban force was attempting to establish a security perimeter around what they believed was her last known position, not realizing she'd moved deep into their area of operations. Their communications discipline was poor, with fighters regularly transmitting their positions and movements. Began using this intelligence to plan her approach routes, staying ahead of their security patrols while moving toward their command element. Her second target was more challenging. The fighter was part of a 2-man observation team positioned on a small ridge that overlooked the cave system where the SEALs were sheltering. Needed to eliminate both men without allowing either to alert their companions, requiring precise timing and coordinated shots. Positioned herself where she could engage both targets in rapid succession. Her first shot dropped the fighter operating their radio equipment, while her second shot eliminated his partner before he could react to his companion's death. Immediately moved to a new position, knowing that the absence of radio check-ins would eventually alert other fighters to the observation team's fate. The Taliban communications net was becoming increasingly frantic as fighters reported losing contact with various elements. Could understand enough of their transmissions to realize they were beginning to suspect they faced a mobile threat rather than a stationary sniper position. This realization was making them more cautious, but also more predictable as they focused on protective rather than offensive tactics. Third and fourth targets were eliminated during their attempt to relocate to what they believed was a more secure position. The men had moved together across open ground, probably thinking darkness provided sufficient concealment for their movement. Thermal imaging capabilities allowed her to track them easily, and her suppressed weapons ensured that their elimination went unnoticed by other enemy fighters. The psychological pressure on the remaining Taliban fighters was becoming obvious through their radio communications. Could hear the stress and fear in their voices as they realized they were being systematically hunted by an enemy they couldn't see or locate. Several were requesting permission to withdraw from the valley entirely, while others demanded reinforcements to help deal with the threat. reached a critical decision point in her operation. The Taliban command element appeared to be positioned in a cluster of buildings about 800 meters southeast of the SEALs' cave, where they'd established what they probably considered a secure command post. Eliminating the leadership would effectively end organized resistance, but approaching the position would require crossing open ground that might be observed or defended. Decided the risk was acceptable given the potential reward. She began a careful approach toward the command position, using natural terrain features and darkness to mask her movement. Her night vision equipment allowed her to identify and avoid several security positions that would have detected a less capable operator. The command post was more sophisticated than had expected. The Taliban fighters had established interlocking fields of fire around their position and posted sentries at key approach routes. But their security was designed to detect conventional military attacks, not infiltration by a single operator using advanced night vision and thermal imaging capabilities. Its fifth target was a sentry positioned to observe the main approach to the command post. The man was alert and properly positioned, but he was scanning for threats using only his natural vision, while could see him clearly through her thermal imaging from a range where he couldn't detect her presence. Her suppressed carbine eliminated him silently, opening a gap in the security perimeter. Moved through the gap and positioned herself where she could observe the command post directly. Through a window opening, she could see several Taliban fighters gathered around what appeared to be a radio setup, probably coordinating with higher headquarters or attempting to call for reinforcements. Counted at least 5 men inside the structure, along with additional fighters positioned around the building's exterior. Sixth and seventh shots eliminated 2 exterior guards in quick succession, both men dropping silently before their companions realized anything was wrong. Immediately shifted position, knowing that the absence of regular radio check-ins would alert the command element to potential problems with their security. The response came within minutes. Could hear urgent voices from inside the building as the commanders realized they'd lost contact with multiple security positions. Several fighters emerged from the structure to investigate, providing with clear targets silhouetted against the lighter interior background. 8th, 9th, and 10th shots dropped 3 more Taliban fighters before the survivors realized they were under direct attack. The remaining enemy forces inside the building began returning fire, but their shots were directed at muzzle flashes and suspected positions rather than actual location. Her suppressed weapons and careful positioning kept her concealed while allowing her to continue engaging targets of opportunity. The firefight at the command post lasted nearly 15 minutes, with systematically eliminating Taliban fighters as they attempted to establish defensive positions or escape from the building. Her 11th through 15th shots accounted for 5 more enemy casualties, effectively destroying the Taliban command structure in the valley. Its radio crackled with transmissions from the SEAL team, who'd been monitoring the sounds of combat from their cave position. Master Chief's voice carried concern mixed with appreciation for the intense fighting that was clearly taking place on their behalf. Guardian Angel Neptune 6 actual, we can hear heavy contact to our southeast. What's your status? Over. Paused her movement to respond, checking her ammunition supply while scanning for additional threats. Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel, command post is neutralized. 17 hostiles eliminated total, but there might be others in the area. I'm moving to clear the route to the LZ now. How's your wounded? Over. The SEAL team leader's response indicated they were ready to move when the situation permitted. Guardian Angel Neptune 6 actual, wounded is stable and mobile. We're ready to move on your command. What's the timeline for extraction? Over. Had been monitoring aircraft frequencies intermittently throughout the night, and she detected increased helicopter activity in the region. Whether this represented friendly extraction assets or enemy reinforcements remained unclear, but either possibility created pressure to resolve the tactical situation quickly. Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel, I'm hearing rotary wing activity on multiple frequencies. We need to get you to the LZ and establish security before someone decides to crash our party. Give me 30 minutes to clear the route, then begin your movement. Over. Continued her methodical advance toward the landing zone, systematically checking each position that could provide overwatch or ambush opportunities along the route the SEALs would need to travel. Her thermal imaging revealed two more Taliban fighters positioned where they could observe or interdict movement toward the extraction site. Her 16th and 17th shots eliminated these final threats, leaving the route to the landing zone clear of enemy observation. Had now accounted for 19 Taliban fighters, reducing what had been a significant enemy force to scattered individuals focused primarily on survival rather than combat operations. Reached the proposed landing zone and began establishing security positions that would protect an incoming helicopter during landing and takeoff operations. The clearing was adequate for most military aircraft, but the surrounding terrain offered multiple positions where enemy forces could establish anti-aircraft positions if given the opportunity. Positioned herself where she could observe the most likely approach routes while maintaining radio contact with both the SEAL team and any extraction aircraft that might be inbound. Her ammunition supply was becoming a concern. She'd expended 17 rounds from her carbine and still had most of her sniper rifle ammunition, but sustained combat operations had taught her to be conservative with remaining supplies. Her radio crackled with a new transmission on the emergency frequency, this one coming from an aircraft rather than ground forces. Guardian Angel, this is 7-2. We have your emergency transmission and are inbound to your location. Can you confirm LZ security? Over. Felt a surge of relief mixed with renewed alertness. Extraction was finally available, but the most dangerous phase of their operation was just beginning. Helicopters were vulnerable during landing operations, and even a single enemy fighter with a rocket-propelled grenade could turn rescue into disaster. 7-2 Guardian Angel. LZ is clear of enemy forces, but we have friendly ground forces moving to the pickup site. 6 personnel, 1 wounded, minimal equipment. Enemy situation is significantly degraded but not completely neutralized. Over. The helicopter crew's response indicated they were experienced with tactical extractions under combat conditions. Guardian Angel 7-2, copy all, ETA 15 minutes. Can you provide security overwatch during our approach? Over. Confirmed her ability to provide security while mentally calculating fields of fire and potential threat vectors. 15 minutes would give the SEALs enough time to reach the landing zone if they moved immediately, but it would also provide opportunities for any surviving Taliban fighters to regroup and mount interference operations. Keyed her radio to contact the SEAL team directly. Neptune 6 actual Guardian Angel. Extraction inbound 15 minutes. Begin movement to the LZ now. I have overwatch established and the route is clear. Move fast and stay alert. Over. Master Chief's response carried the professional calm of someone who'd conducted numerous extraction operations under combat conditions. Guardian Angel, Neptune 6 actual. Roger, moving now. 6 personnel moving to your location. Thanks for everything you've done tonight. Over. Settled into her overwatch position and began systematic observation of all approaches to the landing zone. Through her night vision equipment, she could see the SEAL team beginning their movement from the cave system, with the wounded team member supported by his teammates, but moving under his own power. The next 15 minutes would determine whether her night's work had been sufficient to ensure the Americans' safe extraction. Checked her weapons and ammunition one final time, knowing that if any Taliban fighters had survived her systematic hunt, they would probably make their last stand during the helicopter operation. Spotted movement on the eastern ridge, approximately 400 meters from the landing zone. 2 figures were moving carefully through the rocks, and their route would bring them to a position overlooking the extraction site. Raised her sniper rifle and peered through the scope, confirming that the figures were armed Taliban fighters attempting to establish an ambush position. 18th and 19th shots eliminated both fighters before they could reach their intended position. The suppressed sniper rifle made virtually no sound at that range, and the men simply disappeared behind the rocks without alerting any potential companions to their fate. The helicopter's rotors became audible in the distance, growing steadily louder as the aircraft approached the landing zone. Could see the SEAL team's infrared markers through her night vision equipment as they reached the clearing and established their own security positions around the proposed landing site. Its radio crackled with the helicopter crew's final approach transmission. Guardian Angel, 7-2 on final approach. LZ in sight. Any last-minute threats? Over. Conducted one final scan of the surrounding terrain before responding. 7-2, Guardian Angel, LZ is clear and secure. Friendlies are marked and ready for pickup. Cleared for landing. Over. The U-60 helicopter settled onto the landing zone with the controlled precision of an experienced crew operating under combat conditions. Maintained overwatch as the SEAL team quickly loaded their wounded teammate and prepared for immediate departure. The entire process took less than 3 minutes from touchdown to liftoff. As the helicopter climbed away from the valley floor, heard Master Chief's voice one final time over the radio. Guardian Angel, Neptune 6 Actual, we owe you everything. Thank you for bringing us home. Over. Shouldered her rifle and began her own extraction movement, knowing that her night's work was complete, but her own journey back to safety was just beginning. 25 Taliban fighters had entered this valley intending to eliminate a trapped American Special Operations team. Had systematically hunted 3 weeks after the valley incident, Master Chief sat in a sterile briefing room at Airfield, staring at a classified after-action report that raised more questions than it answered. Across from him, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes from Joint Special Operations Command leaned back in her chair, her expression mixing professional curiosity with obvious frustration. "So let me get this straight, Master Chief," Hayes said, tapping the report with her pen. "Your team was extracted by an unidentified shooter who eliminated 25 enemy fighters single-handedly, provided tactical overwatch for your movement, and coordinated your extraction, but we have no idea who this person actually was." Had been through this conversation multiple times with various levels of command, and his answers remained consistent because they were completely accurate. "Ma'am, that's correct. Guardian Angel identified herself as female, demonstrated advanced marksmanship and tactical capabilities, and maintained operational security throughout our interaction. She saved 6 American lives, and that's really all I can tell you with certainty." The investigation had been thorough but frustrating for everyone involved. Military intelligence had confirmed the elimination of 25 Taliban fighters in the valley, but forensic analysis of the battlefield raised more questions than it answered. The precision of the shooting, the tactical movement patterns, and the systematic nature of the enemy elimination all suggested professional military training at the highest levels. Hayes consulted her notes again, clearly uncomfortable with the gaps in their intelligence. "We've analyzed the ballistic evidence, the tactical patterns, the radio intercepts, everything we could recover from that valley. The marksmanship alone suggests someone with advanced sniper training, probably special operations background. The tactical movement and target selection indicate extensive combat experience, but we can't find any record of authorized operations in that area." Understood the colonel's frustration, but he also understood operational reality. The special operations community was small and tightly knit, with relationships and capabilities that weren't always reflected in official channels. Sometimes the best operators were the ones who operated outside normal command structures when circumstances required it. "Ma'am, with respect, does it really matter who Guardian Angel was? The mission was successful, all personnel were recovered, and a significant enemy threat was eliminated. Maybe we should focus on the positive outcomes rather than the operational details." Hayes shook her head, clearly not satisfied with his pragmatic approach. "Master Chief, someone with advanced military capabilities was operating independently in a hostile combat zone, engaging enemy forces without coordination or authorization from any known command structure. That raises serious questions about accountability, operational security, and potential risks to ongoing operations." Had expected this response, but he also knew things that weren't going into any official report. During his 15 years with the SEALs, he'd encountered operators who worked in areas that didn't officially exist, conducting missions that would never appear in any after-action report. Guardian Angel's capabilities and independence suggested she might be operating at that level of classification. The door to the briefing room opened, and a figure entered who immediately changed the entire dynamic of the conversation. Recognized the newcomer as Colonel James Mitchell from Defense Intelligence Agency, a man whose presence usually indicated that conventional investigation procedures were being superseded by higher-level intelligence considerations. Mitchell was carrying a thick folder marked with classification levels that had rarely seen outside of the most sensitive special operations briefings. The colonel's expression was carefully neutral, but his body language suggested he was bringing information that would significantly change the scope of their discussion. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, Master Chief," Mitchell said by way of greeting as he took a seat at the briefing table. I apologize for interrupting your discussion, but I have information that might clarify some aspects of the Guardian Angel incident. Hayes straightened in her chair, obviously recognizing that Mitchell's presence indicated their local investigation was being overtaken by higher-level intelligence operations. Colonel Mitchell, we're trying to identify the individual who provided support to Neptune 6 during their extraction. Any information you can provide would be appreciated. Mitchell opened his folder and several photographs that he placed on the briefing table where both and Hayes could see them clearly. Recognized them immediately as professional military headshots, the kind used for personnel files and operational briefings. These are photographs of Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, currently assigned to 2nd Marine Division but temporarily detached for special operations, Mitchell said, his tone carrying the weight of classified information. Scout Sniper qualified, 3 combat deployments, extensive experience in precision marksmanship and independent operations. Studied the photographs carefully. The woman in the pictures appeared to be in her late 20s, with dark hair and intense eyes that suggested both intelligence and determination. Her service record, as much as Mitchell was willing to share, indicated exactly the kind of background and capabilities that would explain Guardian Angel's performance in the valley. Hayes leaned forward, obviously processing the implications of Mitchell's revelation. Colonel, are you saying this Marine was conducting authorized operations in support of SEAL team activities? Because we have no record of any such coordination or mission planning. Mitchell's pause suggested he was choosing his words carefully, probably balancing operational security requirements against the need to provide enough information to satisfy legitimate command concerns. Staff Sergeant was conducting independent reconnaissance operations along the Pakistan border, tracking high-value targets that conventional forces couldn't reach. Her presence in the valley was coincidental, but her decision to provide assistance was entirely consistent with her training and operational philosophy. Felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Independent reconnaissance operations sounded like the kind of deep cover intelligence gathering that special operations forces sometimes conducted without conventional command oversight. If was operating at that level, her capabilities and independence would be exactly what they'd observed during the Guardian Angel incident. Colonel, can we interview Staff Sergeant directly? Asked, genuinely curious to meet the woman who'd saved his team's lives. I'd like to thank her personally for her intervention, and she might have tactical intelligence about enemy operations in the region. Mitchell shook his head and detected what might have been regret in the colonel's expression. That won't be possible, Master Chief. Staff Sergeant is currently assigned to operations that require complete operational security. However, I can assure you that your gratitude and that of your team has been communicated through appropriate channels. Hayes consulted her notes again, clearly still struggling with the command and control implications of the situation. Colonel Mitchell, we need to understand the coordination procedures for this type of independent operation. If we have special operations personnel conducting missions without local command oversight, we need mechanisms to prevent friendly fire incidents and ensure operational coordination. Mitchell's response suggested this conversation was entering areas that went beyond normal briefing procedures. Lieutenant Colonel, the coordination procedures you're asking about operate at classification levels that exceed this briefing's scope. What I can tell you is that Staff Sergeant's actions were entirely consistent with established protocols for independent operations, and her intervention resulted in the successful recovery of American personnel without any negative operational consequences. I understood that they were reaching the limits of what could be discussed in their current setting. The Special Operations community operated with layers of classification and compartmentalization that protected both operational methods and individual operators, was clearly operating at a level where normal administrative procedures didn't apply. Colonel, will Staff Sergeant receive appropriate recognition for her actions? Asked. What she did that night went far beyond normal operational requirements. 25 confirmed kills while providing tactical overwatch and coordinating extraction represents exceptional performance under combat conditions. Mitchell smiled for the first time during their conversation and detected genuine pride in the colonel's expression. Master Chief, I can assure you that Staff Sergeant actions have been recognized at the highest levels of command. However, the nature of her current operations requires that any official recognition remain classified for the foreseeable future. Hayes closed her folder with obvious resignation to the limitations of what they could learn through conventional channels. Colonel Mitchell, is there anything else we need to know about Guardian Angel's activities, either for operational security or for planning future missions in the region? Mitchell gathered his photographs and prepared to leave, but his final comments provided some insight into his continuing operations. Lieutenant Colonel, Staff Sergeant continues to operate in the region, and her presence provides additional security for coalition forces conducting operations along the Pakistan border. While coordination through normal channels isn't possible, her activities are generally supportive of conventional mission objectives. After Mitchell left, and Hayes sat in silence for several minutes, processing the information they'd received and its implications for their understanding of the Guardian Angel incident. Felt satisfaction at finally learning something concrete about the woman who'd saved his team, but he also understood that many questions would remain permanently unanswered. "Well, Master Chief," Hayes said finally, "I guess that's as much closure as we're going to get on this incident. Your team was rescued by a Marine scout sniper conducting classified operations. She's apparently still active in the region, and her actions have been recognized through channels we don't have access to." Nodded, accepting the limitations of what they could learn while feeling grateful for the information they'd received. "Ma'am, knowing that Guardian Angel was a fellow service member conducting legitimate operations is enough for me. The important thing is that she was there when we needed her, and she had the skills and determination to make a difference." Hayes signed the final pages of their after-action report, officially closing their investigation of the Guardian Angel incident. "Master Chief, I'm recommending that this entire matter be classified above our current briefing level. The operational details and personnel involved clearly operate in areas that require higher-level security clearances." Agreed with Hayes' assessment, understanding that continuing operations required protection from public disclosure or enemy intelligence gathering. The Special Operations community protected its most capable personnel by maintaining strict operational security, even when their actions deserved public recognition. As prepared to leave the briefing room, he reflected on the strange nature of their rescue and the continuing mystery surrounding their guardian angel. Somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, a Marine scout sniper was continuing to operate independently, providing security for coalition forces while hunting high-value targets along one of the world's most dangerous borders. Hoped their paths would cross again under better circumstances, preferably when operational security requirements allowed for more normal interaction between fellow service members. Until then, he would carry the knowledge that American forces had capabilities and personnel operating at levels that conventional understanding couldn't fully comprehend. The official record would show that Neptune 6 had been extracted following enemy contact in the Afghan highlands. The unofficial reality was that they'd been saved by one of the most capable operators had encountered in 15 years of special operations, a woman whose skills and determination had turned a desperate tactical situation into a successful mission outcome. Gathered his materials and headed back to his team's quarters, where 5 other SEALs were waiting to hear what their investigation had revealed about Guardian Angel. He would tell them what he could while respecting the operational security requirements that protected and her continuing mission. Smiled as he walked through the base, thinking about the conversation he was about to have with his team. They'd been rescued by a Marine, which would probably generate some good-natured inter-service rivalry and jokes. But they'd also been rescued by someone operating at the absolute pinnacle of military capability, and that deserved nothing but respect and gratitude. 6 months after the Valley incident, sat on a wooden bench outside the medical facility at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, watching autumn leaves drift across the carefully maintained grounds. The Maryland afternoon was crisp and clear, a sharp contrast to the perpetual heat and dust of Afghanistan that had been her environment for the past 2 years. Her left shoulder ached slightly, a reminder of the injury that had officially brought her stateside for medical evaluation and unofficial debriefing. Had returned to the United States 3 weeks earlier, following completion of what Defense Intelligence Agency euphemistically called extended reconnaissance operations along the Pakistan border. Her official service record would show assignment to 2nd Marine Division with temporary duty for specialized training. The classified addendum would detail 47 confirmed enemy eliminations, extensive intelligence gathering on high-value targets, and what her commanding officers described as exceptional performance under independent operation conditions. The medical appointment she was waiting for represented the final step in her transition back to conventional military duties. The shoulder injury that had provided cover for her extended operations had healed completely, but military regulations required comprehensive evaluation before returning to full operational status. More importantly, the psychological evaluation would determine whether her months of independent operations had affected her ability to function within normal military structures. Dr. Wells emerged from the medical facility's main entrance, consulting a tablet computer as she approached position. The psychiatrist specialized in treating special operations personnel, and her reputation for discretion and understanding had made her the preferred choice for debriefing personnel returning from highly classified missions. "Staff Sergeant," Dr. Wells said by way of greeting, settling onto the bench beside. "I apologize for keeping you waiting. I wanted to review your file thoroughly before our conversation, and there were some interesting details that required additional consideration." Had been expecting this conversation for weeks, understanding that her transition back to conventional operations would require evaluation of both her physical and psychological condition. Months of operating alone in hostile territory could affect anyone's ability to function within normal military structures, regardless of their training or experience. "Doctor, I understand the evaluation process. I've been operating independently for an extended period, and command needs to ensure I can function effectively within normal unit structures. I'm prepared to answer whatever questions you have about my experiences." Dr. Wells consulted her tablet again, obviously organizing her thoughts before beginning what expected would be a comprehensive discussion of her recent operations. "Staff Sergeant, your file contains some remarkable details. Extended independent operations, significant enemy contact, successful mission completion under extremely challenging conditions. How are you processing those experiences now that you're back in a conventional environment?" Had been thinking about this question for weeks, trying to understand her own emotional and psychological response to the transition from independent combat operations to the relative safety and structure of stateside military life. The contrast was dramatic enough to require conscious adjustment, but she felt confident in her ability to adapt. "Doctor, the independent operations were challenging but rewarding. I was doing work that made a real difference, protecting coalition forces and gathering intelligence that contributed to larger mission objectives. The transition back to conventional operations is requiring some adjustment, but I don't feel that my experiences have negatively affected my ability to function within normal military structures." Dr. Wells made notes on her tablet before continuing with questions that recognized as standard psychological evaluation procedures. "Can you describe your decision-making process during combat situations? Were you comfortable operating without direct oversight or immediate backup from other military personnel?" Understood the underlying concern behind these questions. Extended independent operations could create psychological dependence on isolation and self-reliance that made it difficult to function within team structures. Military psychiatrists needed to ensure returning operators could accept direction from superiors and coordinate effectively with peers. "Doctor, my decision-making during combat was based on training, experience, and tactical assessment of immediate threats. I was comfortable operating independently because my training had prepared me for that level of responsibility. However, I also understood that my mission objectives were part of larger operational goals, and I maintained communication with higher headquarters whenever tactical conditions permitted." Dr. Wells spent the next hour conducting a comprehensive evaluation that covered emotional state, decision-making processes, and ability to transition between independent and team-based operations. Answered honestly and thoroughly, understanding that accurate assessment was essential for her own welfare as well as mission effectiveness. "Staff Sergeant, there's one specific incident that Command has asked me to discuss with you. The rescue of Neptune 6 in the Afghan Highlands. Can you walk me through your decision-making process during that operation?" Had been expecting this question, understanding that her intervention on behalf of the SEAL team had generated significant attention at higher levels of command. The operation represented her most intensive combat engagement during the extended reconnaissance mission, and it had demonstrated capabilities that went beyond normal sniper operations. Doctor, I was conducting routine observation when I detected the SEAL team's tactical situation. They were surrounded, low on ammunition, and facing overwhelming odds. My assessment was that American lives were in immediate danger, and I had the capability to provide effective assistance. The decision to intervene was based on my training, my oath as a Marine, and my responsibility to protect fellow service members. Dr. Wells reviewed her notes carefully before asking the question knew was coming. Staff Sergeant, you eliminated 25 enemy fighters during that engagement, operating alone against superior numbers in unfamiliar terrain. How do you feel about that level of combat activity? Had spent considerable time thinking about this question during her journey home from Afghanistan. 25 confirmed kills represented a significant number for any military operation, and achieving that total during a single engagement was unusual even for special operations personnel. She understood the psychological implications that concerned military psychiatrists. Doctor, every shot I fired that night was necessary to protect American lives. I didn't take any unnecessary risks, and I didn't engage targets that weren't directly threatening the SEAL team or their extraction. I feel that my actions were appropriate given the tactical situation, and I'm comfortable with the decisions I made during that engagement. Dr. Wells continued her evaluation for another 30 minutes, covering relationships with family and friends, her plans for continuing military service, and her interest in returning to operational duties. Answered honestly while understanding that her responses would determine her future assignments and operational responsibilities. Staff Sergeant, based on our conversation and your test results, I'm recommending that you be cleared for return to full operational duties. Your psychological evaluation indicates excellent adaptation to stress, appropriate decision-making under pressure, and healthy integration of combat experiences. However, I do recommend a gradual transition back to team-based operations rather than immediate assignment to independent missions. Felt relief mixed with anticipation as Dr. Wells completed her evaluation. Return to operational status meant she could continue the work she'd trained for, while the recommendation for team-based operations would allow her to develop new skills and perspectives through interaction with other Marines. As prepared to leave Walter Reed, her smartphone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief and unsigned, but its contents made smile for the first time in weeks. As Neptune 6 sends thanks and respects, drinks are on us if our paths cross. M. Realized that Master Chief had somehow obtained her contact information, probably through the intelligence channels that had provided him with details about Guardian Angel's identity. The message represented more than professional courtesy. It was recognition from fellow warriors who understood the bonds created by shared combat. Walked toward the parking area where her rental car was waiting, thinking about the choices that lay ahead. Her evaluation had cleared her for return to operational duties, but she would need to decide whether to request assignment to conventional Marine units or volunteer for continued special operations duties. The past 6 months had demonstrated that she possessed capabilities and temperament suited for independent operations, but they had also shown her the importance of teamwork and support from fellow service members. The SEAL rescue had required both individual skill and coordination with other personnel, proving that even the most capable operators benefited from working within larger military structures. Smartphone rang as she reached her car, displaying a number she recognized as belonging to Colonel Mitchell from Defense Intelligence Agency. The call represented her next step in the transition back to operational duties, and probably an offer of assignment to missions that would utilize her demonstrated capabilities. Staff Sergeant answered, knowing that whatever Mitchell offered would significantly influence her immediate future. This is Colonel Mitchell. I hope your evaluation went well. I'm calling because we have some opportunities that might interest you, assignments that would utilize your specialized skills while providing the team support structure that Dr. Wells recommended. Listened as Mitchell described assignment opportunities that ranged from training other snipers to conducting joint operations with special operations forces from multiple services. Each option offered different challenges and opportunities for professional development, while allowing her to continue serving in roles that maximized her contribution to national security. Colonel, I'm interested in hearing about all the options, but I have one specific request. If possible, I'd like assignments that allow me to work with SEAL teams or other naval special operations units. I've developed respect for their capabilities and professionalism, and I think cross-training opportunities would benefit everyone involved. Mitchell's response suggested he'd been expecting this request, and that coordination with naval special operations was already part of the assignment options he was prepared to offer. We actually have several joint training programs that would benefit from your participation. Advanced marksmanship instruction, independent operation techniques, and tactical coordination between different special operations units. Would you be interested in assignments that combine training responsibilities with operational duties? Felt excitement building as Mitchell described opportunities that would allow her to continue developing her own skills while sharing her knowledge and experience with other special operations personnel. The combination of training and operational duties represented exactly the kind of challenging and rewarding assignment she'd hoped to find. Colonel, that sounds like exactly what I'm looking for. When can we discuss the details? Mitchell's response indicated that transition back to operational duties was about to accelerate significantly. Can you be at tomorrow morning? I have briefing materials and assignment options that require secure facilities for discussion. This could be the beginning of a very interesting chapter in your career. Confirmed her availability while mentally preparing for whatever challenges and opportunities awaited her. The past 6 months had proven that she possessed exceptional capabilities for independent operations, but the future would require developing those abilities within team structures that maximized effectiveness for all personnel involved. As drove away from Walter Reed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from the mountains of Colorado to the valleys of Afghanistan, and now to new opportunities for service. The scared young woman who'd first enlisted in the Marine Corps had evolved into a confident operator capable of extraordinary performance under the most challenging conditions. His phone buzzed with another text message, this one from her grandfather in Colorado. The message was simple but meaningful. Proud of you, granddaughter. Looking forward to hearing about your next adventure. Smiled as she navigated through Maryland traffic, thinking about how she would eventually tell her grandfather about the night she'd saved 6 American warriors in an Afghan valley. That story would have to wait until classification restrictions were lifted, but someday she would share the details of how a girl from the Colorado mountains had become guardian angel. His journey was far from over. New assignments, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve alongside the finest military personnel in the world awaited her. But she carried with her the knowledge that when American lives were in danger, she had the skills, determination, and courage to make a difference. The radio in his rental car was playing classic rock, and she turned up the volume as she drove toward whatever came next. Guardian Angel was heading home, but was just getting started. Might remain Guardian Angel to the official record, but now knew her name, her service, and her continuing dedication to protecting American forces operating in harm's way. That knowledge was enough to satisfy his curiosity and his professional respect for exceptional military performance. Them down and destroyed them, proving once again that superior training, equipment, and determination could overcome significant numerical disadvantages. The valley was quiet now, except for the fatting sound of helicopter rotors carrying 6 American warriors back to safety. Moved through the darkness toward her own extraction point, satisfied with a mission accomplished and lives saved through precision application of lethal force, where 21 Taliban fighters were about to learn what it meant to be hunted by a United States Marine Corps Scout sniper operating on her own terms. The real war was about to begin. Set down the handset and looked around at his team. They'd survived the day, but the night promised its own challenges. Somewhere out in the mountains, their guardian angel was preparing for what came next, and had the feeling that before sunrise, the enemy would learn exactly what kind of mistake they'd made when they decided to trap a SEAL team in this valley.